There's something about Janet Jackson's voice that cuts deeper when she's speaking truth. Not singing. Not performing. Just raw honesty. And this time, she isn't talking about herself, she's talking about her brother, Michael. According to Janet, what happened before Michael Jackson's death wasn't just tragic misfortune or medical negligence. It was deliberate. Calculated. Orchestrated. And at the center of her implication, two of the biggest names in music, Jay-Z and Diddy. We've all heard the whispers. Old conspiracy theories. Industry gossip. But when Janet breaks her silence, people listen. For years she stayed poised, classy, quiet. Now, her accusation lands heavy. Jay-Z didn't just rise to the top, he allegedly stepped over Michael to get there. Behind the curtain, he wasn't simply building an empire. He was allegedly dismantling someone else's. Michael Jackson wasn't just another superstar. He was the king of pop, the man who owned half the music industry through Sony ATV publishing. That catalog gave him power over the Beatles, Mariah Carey, Babyface, Beyoncé, even pieces of Jay-Z's own work. That wasn't just wealth. That was leverage. Dangerous leverage. Janet claims there was a coordinated push to isolate, control, and eventually remove Michael from the equation. And while the world saw brotherhood, unity, and black excellence, she suggests a darker alliance moving in the shadows. Producer Rodney Darkchild Jerkins, who worked closely with Michael, once admitted the king of pop lived in fear. Real fear. He believed he was being watched. Constantly. Constantly threatened, not because of scandals, not because of fans, but because of what he owned. According to Darkchild, Michael knew powerful people wanted that catalog. Wanted it so badly they'd do anything to take it. And Janet says that's exactly why her brother became a target. Now rewind to 2009. Michael's death. The official story. A fatal drug overdose, administered by his personal doctor, Conrad Murray. But here's where it twists. Before calling 911, Murray allegedly dialed someone else. Not another doctor. Not the police. A man named Fahim Mohammed. And who was he? Not a nurse. Not medical staff. He was Diddy's bodyguard. That's right, Diddy's guy was allegedly the first person contacted in Michael Jackson's medical emergency. Suspicious. More like chilling. And it gets worse. Fahim had only been around Michael for less than a year before his death. No long history. No deep connection. Then suddenly, he's planted in the inner circle. Janet believes that wasn't chance. That was insertion. A calculated placement. Meanwhile, Michael's own family was being kept at arm's length, pushed further out of his world. Janet herself says she wasn't even allowed to see her brother in his final days. Michael was overworked, overmedicated, and surrounded by people who hadn't been part of his life until recently, people allegedly tied to the very industry forces he'd spent decades fighting against. Her story isn't just about grief. It's about betrayal. According to Janet, Michael was boxed in, manipulated by a small circle of handlers, and cut off from the people who truly loved him. And when he died, only two men were in the room, Conrad Murray, a doctor with a questionable past, and Fahim Mohammed, a bodyguard with industry ties that raise every red flag imaginable. No family. No lifelong friends. Just two outsiders standing over the king of pop in his final moments. But here's the thing, Michael Jackson's true power didn't just come from his fame. It came from the empire he built behind the curtain. He wasn't just an artist. He was a businessman who controlled more of the music industry than most executives ever could. The Sony ATV catalog wasn't just a prize, it was a weapon. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes why so many powerful figures might have wanted Michael gone. For artists trying to buy back their publishing, Sony was the gatekeeper. But Michael was Sony. He owned half. That gave him leverage no superstar before or after has ever held. And Michael wasn't afraid to use it. He once stood on stage and openly called out Sony itself, naming then-chairman Tommy Mottola as a racist and accusing him of sabotaging black artists. That's not how you play nice in the industry. That's how you declare war. And right around that time, something shifted. Public perception began to shift. Allegations resurfaced. Media narratives grew darker. And behind the headlines, a familiar pattern was taking shape. While Michael was being dragged through the mud, other careers were skyrocketing. Jay-Z and Diddy were securing brand deals, building labels, aligning with corporate America. Meanwhile, legends like Michael, and even peers like Mariah Carey, were catching cases, facing backlash, and losing public favor. It felt less like coincidence and more like someone was flipping a switch. LaToya Jackson later voiced what many suspected: she believed Michael was murdered. Not by accident. Not by neglect. By design. She said Michael had told her, more than once, "They're going to kill me." He felt surrounded, watched, controlled, and unable to trust those closest to him. One name that repeatedly surfaced was Jack Gordon, LaToya's ex-husband. A man accused of forcing her into marriage, manipulating her, and even coercing her into publicly accusing Michael of crimes he never committed. Years later, LaToya admitted she'd been threatened, isolated, and brainwashed into betraying her own brother. But by then, the damage was done. The media had already weaponized her words, and the public had already decided. Insiders claim Gordon wasn't acting alone. Allegedly, he had backing from powerful industry figures. People who wanted Michael's reputation destroyed, because if they couldn't take his catalog by force, they could make him radioactive. Strip away public support, and his leverage vanished. And who allegedly profited most from Michael's fall? Jay-Z and Diddy. Their empires expanded as Michael's influence crumbled. Bad Boy Records and Rockefeller struck deals with the very corporations Michael had once challenged. And not long after Michael's death, Jay-Z secured a massive distribution deal with Sony itself. The timing was chillingly perfect. Rodney "Darkchild" Jerkins wasn't alone in seeing through the smokescreen. Others who worked with Michael described him as careful, disciplined, and deeply protective of his legacy. He didn't party. He didn't indulge recklessly. So when the tidal wave of allegations hit, many insiders didn't see scandal, they saw sabotage. A hostile takeover disguised as character assassination. The isolation Michael endured in his final years wasn't accidental. It was tactical. He was boxed in, surrounded by people who didn't belong, while those who truly loved him were kept away. Every move seemed engineered to weaken him, until the endgame played out. Conrad Murray may have been the man holding the syringe, but Janet Jackson insists he wasn't the only one pulling strings. The real power players weren't in scrubs. They were in designer suits, sitting in boardrooms, moving billions while Michael's life slipped away behind closed doors. And those doors remain the biggest question. When Michael collapsed, Murray didn't immediately call 911. His first call went to Fahim Mohammed. On paper, head of security. In reality, a man with ties to Diddy and other shadowy industry players. He'd only been in Michael's orbit for less than a year, then suddenly, he was standing beside the king of pop in his final moments. No family. No lifelong friends. Just a doctor with a checkered past, and a bodyguard tied to the very machine Michael believed was out to silence him. That doesn't look like protection. That looks like captivity. LaToya didn't mince words. She said her brother was murdered. And the hardest truth to ignore. Michael knew it was coming. He warned them. He told people he was being followed, that he was scared, that they needed to be careful. Michael had warned people. He said certain names were circling him, and he predicted he'd be taken out. Then came the shows. Michael had only agreed to 10. Somehow, that number exploded. Contracts expanded, press tours rolled out, and even as he looked visibly exhausted, he was being treated like a product on an assembly line. LaToya said it was never just about the music. It was about control, of his finances, his image, his every move. If that isn't slavery with a modern twist, what is? Paris Jackson, his daughter, remembers those final days with chilling detail. She said her father was always shivering, always asking for warmth. They sat in darkness. Phones cut off. No lights. No contact. Just shadows. It didn't feel like a home, it felt like a prison. And Janet? She revealed something that lingers. The last time she saw her brother was around her birthday. After that, nothing. She wasn't kept away by accident. She was kept away by design. Whatever happened to Michael Jackson, it wasn't just tragedy, it was intent. By the time the end came, his family learned too late. The machine was already moving. The story was already written. Not long after Michael's death, Jay-Z announced a partnership with Sony. The same Sony Michael had battled publicly. The same Sony whose catalog he half-owned. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you line up the timeline, the pattern stops looking like chance and starts looking like design. Meanwhile, Diddy kept climbing. Allegations slid off him like water. Deals kept coming. His power only grew. And his inner circle, the ones who allegedly handled the shadows, remained untouched, protected behind silence and money. Put the pieces together, and the picture turns chilling, a king surrounded by enemies disguised as allies. A legacy dismantled, piece by piece. A family pushed into the dark while the world watched a legend fall. Now Janet, LaToya, and Paris are saying what used to only be whispered: Michael didn't just die. He was taken. And if that's true, the world doesn't just owe him remembrance. It owes him justice.